Good morning. It is so good to be able to join you live from the sanctuary. As we settle into our time of worship together, I offer these words by an anonymous author from Singing the Living Tradition. May they help center our minds and our hearts this morning. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. So come, my friends, come, and with these words in our hearts, let's worship together.
Strength to go on. You got the light, you got the way. We are never all alone. So long, sweet embraces. So long, summertime. You got to fight, you've got to say, I'm never gonna stay down. You got the night, you got the day. We're never all alone. The sun is gonna shine again. 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 Long time I've been waiting, a long time, long enough. You've got the look, you've got the feel, you've got the face of true love. You got the charm, you've got appeal. I've got to let you go. The sun is gonna shine again. 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 Something tells me it'll be alright. Something tells me it's gonna be okay. Something tells me it'll be alright. Something tells me it's gonna be okay. The sun is gonna shine again. 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 The clouds are rolling, rolling on by. The clouds are rolling on by. The clouds are rolling, rolling on by. The clouds are rolling on by. The sun is gonna shine again. 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 The sun is gonna shine again.
Good morning. The flaming chalice is the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. If you have a chalice, I invite you to light it with me at this time. As we kindle this flame, we recommit ourselves to the mission of this congregation to build a Unitarian Universalist community that transforms lives and empowers people to serve the world. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home. Our opening hymn this morning is number 347, Gather the Spirit. I invite you to sing along.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, ourselves.
Good morning. I'm David Patorti, a member of this congregation and of its board. If you are visiting us for the first time today, I'd like to offer you a very special welcome. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively serving the common good of our shared world. That means whoever you are and wherever you are on your own religious journey, you are welcome here. That also means that, as Unitarian Universalists, we seek wisdom and inspiration from many sources, but affirm our own individual experience and conscience are the best authority for our beliefs. That means we are committed to making our world more compassionate and just, and hope you might join one of our many efforts to do so. If you are new to us, I invite you to fill out our visitor form at www.uufr.org/visitor form. If you do this, you'll start receiving the Chalice, our weekly e-newsletter. I'd like to invite everybody to read through this week's Chalice to find out about everything that's going on at UUFR. Please feel free to join us for our social hour immediately after the service. There are instructions on how to do so on our website. Although we can't greet each other in person this morning, at this time I'd like to invite you to greet one another using the chat function on your screen. Good morning.
I'm Tris Chagman, your Family Ministry Director. Today, I'd like to tell you the story, How Coyote Stole Fire, which is adapted with permission from the version of a Native American folktale on Stoney's Web Lodge, a Native American lore website. Long time ago, humans came into being and they loved the world. They loved the springtime with the beautiful emerging green plant life. They loved the summer, time of berries and growth. As autumn came, the nights became colder and humans shivered. The children and elders would die from the cold. Winter was a hard time. One day, Coyote wandered by the human village. He could hear the wailing of the humans as they mourned their loved ones who had died in the cold of winter. Spring was finally coming, and Coyote heard an old one say, "Feel the warmth of the sun. If only we could have such warmth in winter to heat our teepees." Coyote was not of the people and had no need for fire, but he felt sorry for the men and women who were sad about the others who had died. Coyote knew that on the top of a far mountain, 3 fire beings lived. These fire beings hoarded the fire and would not share with others. Coyote crept to the mountain to see how the fire beings were guarding the fire. Coyote watched the fire beings for many days. He watched as the fire was fed with dry things from the land, like pine cones and twigs. He watched how the fire beings took turns guarding the fire, one at a time at night, while the others slept. Coyote went back down the mountain to speak to his friends among the people. He told them of the shivering, hairless humans and their need for fire. He told them of the selfish fire beings and their inability to share. He asked his friends among the people to help him. Squirrel, chipmunk, frog, and wood all offered to help Coyote bring fire to the humans. Coyote crept back up the mountain. As the fire beings were changing the guard for the fire, Coyote leapt up to the fire and took a burning coal. Immediately, he turned and ran down the mountain. The fire beings flew after him, clawing to try and get the fire back. One being touched the tip of Coyote's tail, which has since always been white. Coyote threw the fire and Squirrel caught it. The coal touched his back and his tail has been arched ever since then. The squirrel threw the ember to Chipmunk, who froze in fear. Finally, he turned and ran, but a fire being clawed his back, giving him white stripes forever. Chipmunk threw the burning coal to Frog, who turned and ran. One of the fire beings grabbed Frog's tail, but Frog jumped and tore free. Thus, he has no tail. The fire beings came at Frog again, and Frog flung the coal at Wood. Wood kept the coal safe, but the fire beings could not figure out how to get the coal from Wood. They yelled at Wood. They sang to Wood. They even promised presents to Wood. But Wood did not give up the coal. Finally, the fire beings returned to the mountain and left the people alone, assuming that if they could not release the coal, neither could the people. Coyote took Wood to the human village and showed them how to get that fire from Wood. He took 2 sticks and rubbed them together. Then he spun a sharpened stick in a hole in another piece of wood. Fire came to the humans, and they were never cold again. This week, I've been thinking about how friction is a source of fire, how sometimes going through hardships can help us develop gifts to bless our community, and how grappling with hard things is sometimes exactly how and why we grow. I am sending you so much love.
This is the time in our service when we acknowledge some of the joys and the sorrows of our community. If you'd like to share an individual joy or sorrow, I'd invite you to do so now using the chat function on your screen. This morning, I lit a candle for the friends, family, and loved ones of George Floyd, and for all of those who have been impacted by his death here in this congregation and around the nation. The anniversary of his death will be on Tuesday, May 25th. And I would also like to share some joys and sorrows that I received by email. Bob Sundstrom's brother, Tom Sundstrom, died after a long illness. Bob and Sherry were fortunate to be able to travel to Hershey, Pennsylvania this last week to celebrate his life, along with family and friends under a large tent in the backyard. Bob, we hold you in our hearts during this time of grief. Rainer Bethune shares the joy of paying off a credit card. Congratulations, Rainer, on this accomplishment. Karen and Glenn Myers celebrated their 48th wedding anniversary on May 11th. Happy anniversary to you both. And Amanda Abbott will be graduating from North Carolina State University Agricultural Institute with a degree in livestock and poultry management on Friday, May 14th. Congratulations on this recent achievement, Amanda. And as we reflect on all of these shared joys and sorrows, as well as the joys and sorrows and fears and hopes of our own lives, let's be together now for a time of stillness and silence, opening ourselves to that spirit within us, between us, amidst us, and among us, called by many names, but known to every human heart, that leads us toward a fuller experience of life. After the silence, we will sing hymn number 15, The Lone Wild Bird. But now let's be together in stillness and in silence.
The lone wild bird in lofty flight is still with me, nor leaves my sight. And I am near, I rest in thee, Great Spirit, come and rest in me. The ends of earth are in thy hand, the seas dark, deep, and far off land. And I am thine, I rest in thee, Great Spirit, come and rest in me.
Everything we do here at UUFR is made possible by the generous financial support that so many of you provide. It is now time for this morning's offering. We try to make being generous as convenient as possible. I invite you to see the instructions that will appear on your screen during our offertory. Please be generous, and thank you.
I used to believe in the days I was naive that I'd live to see a day with justice dawn. And though I will die long before that morning comes, I'll die believing still it will come when I am gone. Someday, when we are wiser, when the world's older, when we have learned, I pray someday we may yet live to live and let live. Someday life will be fairer, need will be rarer, greed will not pay. Godspeed this bright millennium on its way. Let it come someday. When the world's older, when things have changed, some dread day these dreams will all be new. Till then we'll wish upon the moon. Change will come one day, someday soon.
This Sunday, many of our Christian neighbors and friends are celebrating Pentecost. As Unitarian Universalists, Pentecost is not a holy day we often celebrate. However, this year the Pentecost story has some meanings that are meaningful at this particular time in history. And so our first reading this morning is the Pentecost story from Acts chapter 2. Our story begins in Jerusalem, in a house where Jesus' followers had gathered together to offer one another comfort and hope following the violent execution of their leader by Roman authorities. They had spent the 40 days following his death trying to reorganize their broken movement while wondering when and how the better world Jesus had taught about would come now that Jesus himself was dead. And now we continue the story as it is told in Acts 2. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues, as of fire, appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us, in our own native language? In our own languages we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power." Peter raised his voice and addressed them. "This is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and daughters shall prophesy." And Peter testified with many other arguments. Those who welcomed his message were baptized, and that day about 3,000 persons were added. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. Our second reading this morning is a poem by Amy Lowell called "The Giver of Stars." Hold your soul open for my welcoming. Let the quiet of your spirit bathe me with its clear and rippled coolness, that loose-limbed and weary I find rest outstretched upon your peace as on a bed of ivory. Let the flickering flame of your soul play all about me, and into my limbs may come the keenness of fire, the life and joy of tongues of flame, and going out from you, tightly strung and in tune, I may rouse the blear-eyed world and pour into it the beauty which you have begotten.
Normal. The word normal seems to be on everyone's lips these days. One minute we hear life is starting to return to normal, and the next moment we wonder, will things ever go back to normal? What does normal mean these days? True, the pandemic stranglehold on our lives is at last relaxing. As restrictions ease, we're beginning to resume more normal activities, things we couldn't safely do last year. I went to a baby shower yesterday and it was wonderful. At the same time, the world in which we resume normal life has changed. Radio advertisements encouraging people to get the shot and consumer perks for fully vaccinated people would have seemed like something from a sci-fi disaster movie a year ago. They're just part of a normal life now. We look forward to life going back to normal as we begin to resume normal activities. And at the same time, we can't go back to the old normal. But also, we don't know yet what the new normal will be like. With the very idea of normal so topsy-turvy, it's no wonder many people don't feel quite normal as society begins to open up again. I've heard so many of you talk about not feeling back to your old selves yet, not feeling the same way that you did before the pandemic turned so many of our lives upside down. As restrictions ease, fear and hesitation continue to maintain a firm grasp on so many of us. You know, at my rink, they just lifted mask requirements. I'm fully vaccinated. The CDC says it's safe now for me to go maskless in big, airy places. And heaven knows that I hate the feeling of that mask on my face, especially while exercising. It's difficult to breathe through it when exerting myself. And yet I feel uncomfortable out there on the ice around unmasked skaters. It didn't matter that there were not that many people out there. It didn't matter that the few people out there were nowhere near me. I still felt reluctant to take off my mask. And so I left it on, even as I asked myself, when would I feel safe removing it? I know many of you have had similar feelings about things going back to normal. Some of you have expressed reluctance to return to work in person. Some of you have expressed anxiety about rusty social skills, like having to engage in those face-to-face conversations and small talk. And again, I've heard people talk about feeling like they have less energy than they did last year, even for things they love. I was chatting online with a friend recently. He said he can't understand why he feels so blah about everything, to use his phrase. He can't understand why the idea of resuming normal life, something he really wants to do, feels like a huge, unwelcome chore. There are things he wants to do, things that he loves doing, that he has had to put on hold for an entire year. He used to lead tabletop role-playing games at a gaming store, but wasn't able to do so during the pandemic. Now he's fully vaccinated and the store is beginning to allow some outdoor games. His players want to get back to the gaming table. He'd love to pick up his hobby again, but he says he can't seem to summon the will, the energy to do so. He feels, to use his word again, blah about the whole thing. Life is going back to normal, or at least forward to a new normal. Exciting opportunities are emerging. Familiar things we love and care about are once more becoming available to us. But many people don't feel fired up and ready to go just yet. Where did our inner fires go? As the world opens up once more, we need our energy and our willpower, our passion and inspiration, our courage and our eagerness more than ever. But many people find themselves instead feeling tired, reluctant, even disinterested. Some people claim the problem is that we're just not trying hard enough to get back to normal. They claim that we've grown lazy and whiny this past year. They claim that with so much closed down these last several months, we've gotten used to having less to do in our daily lives. That life has slowed down so much that we are all used to slacking off now. The solution, they claim, is to stop whining, toughen up, and force ourselves to just do all the things we're so reluctant to do. Then those inner fires will reignite through the heat of good, hard work. You've probably seen a version of this narrative trending in recent news stories. Companies struggling to hire workers amid the so-called labor shortage explain away their problem with the words, "Nobody wants to work anymore." So too do employers encountering resistance from workers who don't want to make the shift back from remote work to in-person work. We hear this narrative from them as well. According to this narrative, unemployed workers have come to enjoy not working this past year far too much to bother finding jobs. Meanwhile, according to this narrative, remote workers have grown accustomed to slacking off this past year and don't want to go back in person, where they will have to work harder. The assumption here, of course, is that people working from home get less done if they don't have a boss peer over their shoulder all day and ensure they're working. Supporters of this narrative point fingers at safety nets that have helped people survive the pandemic's financial stresses. One news headline claims that unemployment benefits are crippling employers' ability to find workers. Another article I read explored discrepancies between actual worker productivity and employer perceptions of worker dedication to their jobs. The article found that many employers believe that remote workers are less dedicated to their jobs than workers who commute to a place of work. But research has demonstrated that worker productivity actually increases with remote work. Those of you who are doing remote work probably know a few reasons why. Workers, it turns out, don't need constant surveillance in order to get them to do their jobs. And unemployed workers don't need to have safety nets pulled out from under them to get back into the workforce. They need jobs that offer financial security and safety from COVID. Yet, even if it were true that people's reluctance to resume normal life was simply a matter of not trying hard enough, this narrative doesn't hold up outside the workplace. Laziness doesn't adequately explain why some people are reluctant to resume activities that they dearly love, or why some people describe feeling hesitant to do things they really want to feel excited about. My friend, the gamer, doesn't feel blah about everything related to gaming and other things he loves because he's grown lazy. Something else is going on. That something is called trauma. This has been a devastating, terrifying, and overwhelming year for many people. We have been through a profound trauma. Indeed, we're not completely through the trauma, not yet, though we are at last seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Recovery is going to take a long time. At the very least, full recovery will take as long as needed for the nation to process our collective grief over the lives lost. It is estimated that here in the United States, 1 in 5 people have lost a close friend or a relative to COVID-19, and 1 in 3 know someone who has died. Many of our cherished ways of mourning and caring for one another in our grief have been disrupted and diminished. And even as we lost loved ones and did our best to grieve in a changed world, many of us also lived in fear for our own lives and the lives of our other loved ones and our neighbors. And meanwhile, in an effort to save lives, people's worlds suddenly turned upside down and inside out in countless, intensely stressful ways. The ground under our feet never stopped shifting this year, forcing people to constantly scramble to find a place to stand, rarely able to catch a breath before the earth shook anew. That kind of trauma and uncertainty takes an enormous toll on our well-being. The National Institute on Mental Health reported that here in the United States, a whopping 1/3 of people suffered symptoms of anxiety or depression this past year, twice as many as before COVID. Many people have been struggling and are still struggling. And we didn't endure these traumas for a brief time, but for over a year now and still counting. I'm not surprised knowing that a lot of people are feeling fearful, low energy, and reluctant to jump back into normal life. The world we're moving out into is on fire. We've been badly burned, and the trauma has burned many of us out. This burnout is completely natural and expected during a time of such profound trauma. It would be weird if we were not feeling this way. But it is also a shame. This world, this traumatized world on fire, needs us. Howard Thurman once said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it." Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. This wounded world needs people to minister to it out of the depths of our love, to help it recover and one day reach a healthy new normal. But it is hard to minister to a traumatized world when you are traumatized too. And it is hard to come alive when you are burned out. We need to somehow heal from this burnout. We need to somehow reignite the fire within our hearts, but how do we do that? The 2 stories that we heard earlier have some wisdom to offer. Both stories are about fire coming to a traumatized community and bringing them the power to care for a hurting world. In the coyote story, the humans had lost countless loved ones during the frozen winter and were deep in mourning. In the Pentecost story, the apostles were living under Roman occupation in the aftermath of the violent execution of their leader. These were all people coping with the aftermath of great trauma. The story of the Pentecost begins with the apostles inside a house. They were not yet out in the streets preaching to the people. They were not yet out in the world trying to create the more just and compassionate community that Jesus taught about. It was only 40 days after his death, and they were holed up together inside, praying. And then the tongues of flame came to them, and then they were transformed. Fire, you see, needs space in order to ignite. Like space between logs, fire needs oxygen. When we are burned out, we need to give ourselves space to catch our breath. There can be a temptation to try to force things along in the hopes that doing so will make recovery happen faster. We may decide to jump back into a normal life before we're truly ready. Sometimes the fake it till you make it approach does work. But when we're talking about recovery, faking like we are okay when we are not isn't strength, but avoidance. If you need it, give yourself the space and time to breathe. Wait to take the mask off if you don't feel safe yet. Talk to your boss about the possibility of continuing to work from home, at least for a time, if you're not ready yet to resume work on site. Continue to watch services here at UUFR online for a time if you're not ready to resume in-person worship with us in a few weeks. Say no to that project, volunteer opportunity, vacation, or outing until you're ready. Give yourself the space you need. Your fire needs space between the logs and oxygen in order to ignite. And when you create that space for yourself, you open yourself up to life's unexpected blessings to come settle within you. Perhaps one day you'll notice that flame within you shining brightly once more. The coyote story offers 3 pieces of wisdom. In the story, the fire beings were the first to possess the flame. They fed the fire with dry things from the land and took turns at night guarding the fire while the others slept. When you feel those first sparks of the flame within you reigniting, remember to feed the flames. Howard Thurman, you may recall, encouraged us to serve the world by doing that which makes us come alive. Our world has many needs. Society will always try to tell you what you ought to be doing to be of service. But your true gifts to the world are those that make you feel most alive. Pay careful attention to those things and make time in your life for them. If you are an artist and art makes you come alive, make art. Feed that flame. If you are a teacher and teaching people makes you come alive, teach. The world needs artists and teachers. Don't force yourself to do things in service to the world that don't make you come alive. Find those things that feed your inner flame and know that they will also be a balm to our bruised, hurting world. And remember that you don't have to do everything all by yourself, even the things that you love. The fire beings took turns tending the fire overnight. They allowed themselves breaks when they needed them, and they trusted others to step up and take care of things for a while they rested. Reverend James and I are both ministers, and we both love our work. But we also support one another in taking time off now and then, because we need rest too, even when doing things that we love. When I'm on vacation, I am able to relax and to rest because I know I can trust Reverend James to cover for me. And when he is away, I do my best to return the favor because that's how we keep those fires burning bright, by taking turns. You don't have to do everything by yourself, even when you love what you're doing. Especially as we move into a new normal and continue to cope with the aftermath of this profound trauma, we need to remember that it doesn't all depend on each of us, but on all of us. Trust the people in your life to do their part. Take breaks when you need them. Support the people around you when it is their turn to rest. Hold each other up. Keep those flames burning. And finally, in this story, in order to release fire from the wood, Coyote had to rub sticks together. He had to create that friction. Many of us feel burned out right now because we've been coping with trauma, a kind of friction in our lives. Coping with traumatic experiences and situations is hard work. It's exhausting, but it's work that has to be done. It may sound cliche, but it really is true. When it comes to trauma, the only way out is through. We cannot heal from trauma by avoiding it. We have to face it. Allow yourself to be honest about what you have gone through and are going through and the way that it has really impacted you. Sometimes we behave as though the best way to deal with hard experiences in life is to avoid talking or thinking about them, or at least avoid the hard parts. We may feel like we need to only think positive. But acknowledging the pain and struggles in our lives is necessary if we are to heal from them. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes when we face trauma head on and allow ourselves to fully feel what we feel, unexpected gifts emerge. Sometimes those gifts come into our lives as blessings upon us. Insight, wisdom, maybe a new friend that we met in the midst of hardship, maybe a piece of music we heard on the radio that helped us find meaning in the midst of our own pain in ways that strangely enriched our lives. There's something about the pain of trauma that makes the blessings that sometimes emerge in the midst of it stand out more brightly. And sometimes when we allow ourselves to process our trauma, gifts emerge within us as blessings we can offer the world. Friends, we've all been through an enormous experience this past year, and in many ways are still in the middle of it. Times like these change us. They can change us in harmful, maladaptive ways, burning us out or even worse. But they can also spark something beautiful and precious within us. Amid that friction in our lives, sparks can fly. New spiritual gifts can kindle within us. Gifts like patience, listening, creativity, a new sense of priorities or perspective, tender care, fierce protection for the things we love, the ability to live more simply and with more gratitude. All gifts we can offer that the world needs. May we find space within ourselves and our lives to give those sparks room to ignite. May we find ways to feed the flames within. May we tend the flames with those around us, remembering that we do not need to do everything all by ourselves. And with hearts on fire, may we bring light and warmth to a world in need of our care. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so.
Please join in singing number 118, This Little Light of Mine. Number 118. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I hope that you will join us for social hour in one of our Zoom rooms after the service. It is time now for us to extinguish this flame and bring today's time of worship to a close. Let's end with the words of Rebecca Parker. Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting. Any of these can be used to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question. What will you do with your gifts? May our lived answers to this question serve to bless the world as we slowly emerge back into it. Amen, and blessed be.